It's Sunday, November 20, 2022. Welcome to the 40th episode in this series from MeidasTouch and 5-Minute News called The Weekend Show, where we take a deep dive into the news of the week. You can subscribe to this show as audio as well as video, in addition to my daily 5-Minute News podcast on iTunes or wherever you get yours. Joining me today is Leigh McGowan, aka PoliticsGirl, the host of the PoliticsGirl podcast and the viral breakfast rant videos. She's a huge star on TikTok, and now she returns to the weekend show. So great to see you again.
Oh, it's great to be here, Anthony. Thank you for having me.
So we last spoke probably about 6 months ago, and a lot has happened in the world of politics since then.
Yes.
And I don't really know where to start. I guess we should probably start with the big news of the week, which is that on Friday, the Attorney General Merrick Garland named a special counsel to oversee the Justice Department's investigation into the presence of classified documents at Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate, and as well as key aspects of a separate probe involving January 6th, the insurrection, and his efforts to undo the 2020 election. Now, this is the equivalent of we saw with Robert Mueller and the Russia investigation. This is the Attorney General saying, "Okay, I'm done here. I'm going to hand it over to somebody who is a special prosecutor, somebody who's super skilled at this. This guy Jack Smith he's no amateur. I mean, this guy is as good as they come." Do you think that off the back of this, Trump might eventually end up in an orange jumpsuit in Guantanamo Bay, or are we just going to have to, put up with him becoming president again?
Yes, no, listen, I don't think Trump is ever going to end up in an orange jumpsuit in Guantanamo Bay. I think at the end of the day, we have to accept the fact that if Trump faces any repercussions, which I have always believed he will, and I think he will, he's in such a special position that he's never going to end up in an actual prison or jail. He's got Secret Service for the rest of his life. It just doesn't make much sense to put a president in an actual prison. So he'll probably live his life out at Mar-a-Lago on house arrest is really what we're looking at. But I actually do think that there's no way this guy skates. There's just not. I know that people think, he's going to get away with everything. It's just, he's not. What we're looking at now with this special counsel is exactly what needed to happen. This is exactly the type of scenario in which a special counsel regulation was meant to be applied. What they've done is they've taken the Justice Department proper, who was nominated by the sitting president and chosen by the sitting president, out of the equation. The special counsel still answers to the Attorney General, but they've made it separate. So there is no illusion of political will or being pushed by the president. They're completely separate to begin with. We only got confused that the Justice Department and the president worked together during Trump's presidency. Yes, but that is not how it's supposed to work. That is not how it's supposed to work. That the Attorney General is not the president's private lawyer. The Attorney General does not work for the president. The Attorney General works for the American people. And the special counsel is just one more step removed from someone who was appointed by the sitting president to, in this case, investigate a prior sitting president. So I think it is the most appropriate choice. People were worried that it would take longer for things to happen, appointing a special counsel, but this guy, Jack, seems to be hitting the ground running, and they don't think it'll slow down anything at all.
The criticism, though, from the Republicans, who of course now have control of the House of Representatives, is that it is a partisan move, and that it does have Joe Biden's fingerprints all over it. And, from their perspective, they are using it like an equivalent to Putin jailing Alexei Navalny. They're saying, well, you're just trying to put your political opponents in jail. That's literally how they see it.
How do we
kind of deal with that criticism?
Well, listen, we're going to hear that criticism no matter what we do. You can't win for winning. The Republican House, whether they're in power or not in power, is always going to be the most hypocritical group of people you've ever seen in your life. I mean, talk about a witch hunt. What they're doing right now, they haven't even gotten into power yet. And they ran on inflation and they ran on crime. And the very first thing they're going to do is open investigations into Joe Biden and his family. Like, if you want a witch hunt, if you want people that are targeting their political enemies, they are the party to look at. I mean, we had Hillary Clinton investigated right up to 2 weeks before the election. And no one remembers that all the emails we talked about, there was only 3 in 30,000 that could have been compromised. And they were all declared not to have been secret.
But
so
that's
we
detail.
keep forgetting.
I mean, they don't care for the
It doesn't
detail,
matter. The thing is that these people are always going to be giving us partisan talking points. And, they're going to be talking about Hunter Biden till the end of time. So what we have to do, and what we always say, is that if we want to live in a world where there is a rule of law, and one party has already abandoned the rule of law by trying to overturn the election, by having an insurrection, by taking, secret documents home with them and then being like, what? I had them. What? One party has already decided that they're totally willing to abandon the rule of law. Then the other side either has to also abandon the rule of law, which only serves the party that wants it gone, or they have to follow the law so meticulously that it makes most of us feel physical pain to watch how slow it's going, because they have to dot every I and cross every T and make sure they did everything exactly by the book. Are there always still going to be people complaining? Of course. But are they going to do it exactly as it should be so that there is, less things to complain about? Yes. And that's going to take a longer time, and there's always going to be complainers, but they're doing it the way they should be. It's not partisan. It's law.
And this guy, Jack Smith, I mean, he has been prosecuting in The Hague.
Yep.
He is somebody he's done political crimes, he's done fraud, he's done all sorts of things that are, very much in Donald Trump's wheelhouse. So he's clearly the right man for the job. And as you said, it doesn't look like he's going to slow, this is going to slow down because of him. In fact, if anything, it might speed up the process, because it means that Merrick Garland is now, not having to do stuff himself, and it's been delegated.
Yeah.
I mean, do you remember how much hope we all held out when Robert Mueller was given the job? And everyone was like, well, this is it. He's by the book. He's done it before. He's the most experienced. He might be a conservative, but, he's tried both teams before. And that turned out to be a bit of a damp squib because of the way that it was presented. And it got hijacked by Bill Barr, who kind of paraphrased it and changed the narrative. And it was very disappointing. And I'm sure that Robert Mueller is probably just as disappointed as the rest of us, because all of that work basically went to nothing. We still have Donald Trump going, Russia, 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 Russia. And, the reality, I mean, we even had a Russian just a week ago admit that he meddled in the election. He actually admitted it. And still, it doesn't hold water for the Republicans.
I know. I think the thing is that, the problem with repetition, and the problem with propaganda media, and the problem with repeating a lie over and over and over again is that to a certain group of people, it will always appear to be true. And the problem is that just saying something enough times doesn't make it true. It just doesn't. There's facts and there's not facts. Russia did meddle in our election. So you can call it the Russia hoax all you want, but the facts are they did meddle. The facts are Donald Trump did break the law. The facts are from the day he was sworn in, he was breaking the law with the emoluments clauses. The man has been a walking criminal since day one. And I think that the country just wasn't truly prepared for someone like Trump. I don't think they were. I think we did a lot of things on a handshake. We did a lot of things on the way we've always done it. We did a lot of things that we thought would be held up by people of morals and candor and standing, and that would be a certain amount of a moral character we could count on from the American president. And then we had someone that had zero moral character and didn't mind breaking the law. And all of a sudden you realize that a lot of the things you count on are not actually written down laws. They're just expectations that every other president before has done. And so everything changed after the Donald Trump years, and I think it will continue to change moving forward. I'm glad that they put Jack Smith in charge. I think that's exactly the right move to make. And it seems like the pace in which he's planning to go forward and just focus solely on this one case is exactly what we should be doing. And I know he thinks he's going to work completely independently and move everything forward expeditiously and go wherever the law dictates and the facts allow. And I would want that for anything. It doesn't matter if I'm a Democrat or a Republican. Like this entire thing that we were just talking about with the Republicans and talking about investigating Hunter Biden. I think what they have misunderstood is that Democrats are okay if you arrest Hunter Biden, right? If Hunter Biden has committed a crime,
Yeah.
Jail him. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
we're not trying to protect him. You know, did the man work with nepotism? Yes. Welcome to a certain subset of society. That's how it works. Did he capitalize on his last name? Absolutely. But so does, you know, a fair amount of the people who run our world.
But he also wasn't in the administration. I mean, I said the other week that it's like investigating Tiffany Trump and saying that Tiffany is, you know, in some way involved in shady dealings. You know?
I mean, it's
her greatest crime was getting married.
Well, listen, I mean, this
that
is
came
always
out wrong.
Look, she's done very well for herself. She married very well. Yeah. She knew what she was getting into. But I think the thing that's always so astounding is that we can't stop talking about Hunter, who, as you said, had no place in the administration. There's no evidence that points to the fact, after how many years of talking about it, 4 years of talking about it.
And investigating. I mean, he's been under investigation for ages.
There's a judge overseeing Hunter Biden's case right now, a Trump-appointed judge. His father didn't come in and get a new judge for his son. He hasn't touched his son's case. So we're already in a position where Hunter Biden is being investigated. And at this point, I kind of feel like, okay, we're 4 years into this. If you don't have anything yet, you're going to struggle. Now we're talking about who's paying how much for his art. And I'm like, oh, Lord, you know, like this is hardly... Okay, look into it. Like, sure, look into it. Yeah. But I highly doubt that his father's making deals based on who's buying Hunter's art. Now, we can say that people made deals with the Trump government based on who stayed in his hotel, because we've seen a ton of people, from the Qataris to the Saudis to the Israelis, coming and staying in Trump Tower and spending hundreds of millions of dollars, giving it right directly to the family and then expecting rewards.
And we just heard about 2 deals with Saudi Arabia, with the Trump family. And, you know, it's all connected. And there was a report a couple of days ago that said Trump made something like $1.5 billion during his presidency because he hadn't, you know, divested from his business interests.
Well, exactly. And then, of course, if we're going to keep talking about first kids, we should talk about the first kids that actually were in the administration. You know, Ivanka was a special advisor to the president. She had a staff at the White House. Jared was in charge of everything from peace in the Middle East to, like, you know, the PPP loans.
I wouldn't put that guy in charge of getting the pizzas.
No one would put that guy in charge of anything. And then suddenly he ends up with $2 billion from the Saudis to invest, when we all know he's terrible at investing because he entered the White House years $600 million in debt from a business in New York, right? And then the couple themselves, Ivanka and Jared, came out of the White House $640 million richer from patents and deals with China and deals with Japan. So if you want to talk about first kids and how they capitalized on the name of the president and the president's position, and they worked in the administration, then I feel like we're focusing on the wrong kids. But like I said, you can't put hypocrisy on a shelf when it comes to this particular Republican Party, because that is all they have: anger, hatred, and hypocrisy.
I kind of feel like the Trump family wouldn't know how to go straight if it was given to them on a plate, right? Like their natural way of doing business is corrupt, and it's underhand, and it's illegal, and it's tax evading, and it's all of these backroom dealings and dodgy dealings, even from like the number of floors of Trump Tower and all of the kind of all the stuff, the university and the stakes and the ties. I mean, everything. There's always a story connected.
Oh, I know.
And Michael Cohen's very good at talking about this stuff. And I sometimes think that they must have no peace, this family. Like, at what point do they just like flop on the couch and Netflix and chill and have nothing to worry about? I just think they must be looking over their shoulder the whole time.
Yeah, it's a hustle. It's a constant hustle. But I think you've been taught it. I mean, you're looking at the 3rd generation of this kind of behavior. It's a taught mobster-like behavior. How can you undermine in it? I think the person that puts in perspective the most is Mary Trump, who was Trump's brother's child, and how her father never quite fit into the Trump mold, what was expected from the father. And he was basically turfed out on his ear with nothing because he just wouldn't toe the family line. I mean, it's a little bit like the Republican Party, or a little bit like the mob. He was not corrupt enough. He did not have the stomach for the way the Trumps were to behave. And, you know, Trump came into the presidency with 1 million people who had done business with him in New York for 20, 30 years, saying, this guy's a complete con man. He's ruined millions of small businesses, this kind of thing. I mean, the people that catered his wedding to Marla Maples, He just got to the end of his wedding and was like, I'm not going to pay
But
you.
I think,
I
think they idolize the mob, though. I feel like they enjoy being the mob. I've heard a few things recently, something that Donald Trump Jr. said. Remember, he came out with a phrase and the interviewer was like, well, what's that? And he's like, oh, it's like a mob phrase. And then Trump on stage the other day said, the great Al Capone. And I said, who says the great Al Capone, right? Al Capone was a criminal, right? And broke so many people's kneecaps. Who refers to him as the great? I think they idolize the mob. They enjoy being a crime family. It's actually like it's a badge of honor.
Well, I think it's the same way that they idolize dictators and authoritarian leaders. What you're really idolizing is the type of person that gets to live their life without consequences, the type of person that gets to live their life without answering to anybody, the type of person who gets to live their life where they make the rules and they change the rules depending on what they want to be doing. And that is mobsters, that is dictators, that is authoritarians. That's the kind of leader he wanted to be, where it's like, what I say goes, shoot these protesters in the knees, like that kind of thing. And just hoping that they would do it because that's what he wanted. That's the sort of drive to power that Trump wants and that his children were happy to enable, and that his wife, his third wife is, I guess, happy to turn a blind eye to. So this is how they
complicit.
Know.
She is quite complicit. And I've heard in those secret tapes that were released of Melania talking about Christmas decorations or something. She really came over as quite a vile, very right wing character. She didn't look like or sound like she looks. And I thought that was kind of interesting. I just want to talk for a second about a final thing with Merrick Garland's announcement. He actually said that Trump announcing his candidacy for 2024 is part of the reason why they're announcing this special counsel.
Right.
Now, let's just talk for a second about the timing of Trump's announcement, as well as the terrible kind of speech, that kind of lazy walrus speech that he made. He was, I love kind of guessing when he's on script and off script. And when I'm watching it, I say out loud in my living room, oh, he's off the script. Let's see where he's going to go now. And then he has to find his place again. That speech went on for an hour and 12 minutes, I think.
Yes.
The news networks cut away after about 25 minutes, including Fox. They were like, okay, we're done with this. And it went to Hannity, who was basically trying to protect Trump by not airing the speech. It was hatred of America, talking about an America that I didn't recognize. He was saying what a terrible place this is and how 2 years ago it was perfect. And I'm thinking, surely even his supporters are sitting at home listening to this, looking around and going, it's not really as bad as you're saying it is.
Do you
think that
I don't know if they
even
are.
the base might have been like, because people in the room were trying to leave and security stopped them.
I know. That was quite a scene with the people trying to leave. Here's the thing. The speech was scheduled for 30 minutes and he spoke for, like you said, over an hour. And I think he goes off script more often than we actually think. Maggie Haberman, who's carrying water for him still for no reason that I can discern, said, he's really coming into himself here. He's getting stronger as he speaks. He's even ad-libbing. And I thought, he's always ad-libbing. It's a constant ad-lib.
He's happier ad-libbing. He's happier.
He's happier ad-libbing, which goes back to what we were talking about not answering to anybody. You know what I mean? He's staying on script for just as limited amount of time as he can. And then it's all him. It's him without consequence, right? And I think the problem is that we have allowed propaganda media and people like Sean Hannity sort of trying to cover for him to give him an illusion of power and smarts and brilliance that he does not have. And I wonder if it'll be interesting to watch what happens since Murdoch has said he's not following Trump into this next election, because so much of Trump's success came from the backing of Fox and the Post and the Wall Street Journal and all these media touchstones that Murdoch owns. And it's not that Murdoch isn't behind what Trump would offer. It's that they're no longer convinced he can win. So they're ready to move on to the next right-wing authoritarian type person that they think has a better chance of winning. It's not that their morals have changed or they suddenly grew a conscience. It's that they want to win. And they watched the midterms and they were like, ugh, maybe he doesn't have it anymore. And they're pulling and they're going a different direction. Not a different direction philosophically, just a different direction as far as winning. Yeah. And I think that the church might be doing the same thing. And I find that fascinating because they were just so hell-bent on him. And now they're like, were we being used? And they're just going to switch over and do the same thing with DeSantis. And I find the whole thing sort of mesmerizing. I don't know if the general public, I wonder this because I have very close family members who religiously watch Fox and are absolutely devoted to Donald Trump. And I was watching the play out of this midterm elections and how everyone decided to blame Trump. And I thought, I wonder how they feel watching this because they are so sure he's the Messiah. And when their media, which is their sole source of information, turns on the Messiah, where do they go? Do they follow where the media tells them to go? Or do they think the media is now lying to them because they're bad-mouthing the Messiah? And so I've always been heartbroken that I can't personally convince them to think another way, but I will be
You're wasting your time.
I know, which is why I don't do it. But I focus on the non-voters as much as possible because there's so many of them. But I'm interested to see what happens if where you have been getting all your information suddenly turns on the person you thought was the pinnacle.
But this is what will expose the difference between an authoritarian dictator-style character versus, on the Democratic side, a political party with a progressive ethos and an interchangeable leader.
Right.
And I think, the problem that America has been dealing with is they have fallen in love with an individual, a singular man who happens to be the most flawed person in human history. But he's
maybe
the guy
that's why they like him.
Pedestal.
I mean, honestly, maybe that's why they like him.
They see their own flaws in him, maybe, and it makes their own kind of vile behavior totally excusable. But you're right, switching out that Messiah for another Messiah, because there can only be one God, right?
Yes.
So how do you do that? I mean,
how do you do that?
How do you change that person?
It'll be fascinating because you can keep up with the Democrats are evil narrative. That has not changed.
Yeah.
But how do you switch your Messiah? How do you go from Jesus to Muhammad and have no one notice, right? That will be interesting to watch.
The pastors will be like, oh, well, it turned out that we got it wrong.
Turns out he wasn't anointed by God. It was actually, I don't know what you do. And I will be fascinated
They'll say it's Brian,
to see it play.
not Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
I get it. So let's just talk for a second about the, announcing your candidacy 2 years out. I mean, I haven't been around long enough to know if that is early. It sounds pretty early to me. Well, would that normally happen?
Listen, in America, yes, it's become a thing to do because as soon as you announce, you can raise money, right? I mean, Trump was never actually, he announced he was running for 2020, like at the inauguration in 2018, right? Like it was 4 years before.
There was cash to be made.
Because there's cash. It's a grift, right? So even if he doesn't actually plan, because I've been thinking for years, but now he's fighting with Ron, so I think it'll be interesting. But I thought for years he'd say he was running, raise money for a while, and then turn, I don't want to give them any ideas, but turn his benevolence on a successor, turn his benevolence on someone like Ron DeSantis, but with the caveat that when Ron DeSantis becomes president with his support, Ron DeSantis then pardons him for everything he might have done, right? So it's like a deal. He gets to stay sort of the kingmaker and Ron DeSantis gets to be president and he also gets, but he has at least enough now state charges that a presidential pardon wouldn't help him. So now I think he's just fighting with Ron because his ego's in the way. And I think that that's great because I don't think Ron is this killer that everyone thinks he is. I don't think he can win on a national level. And I don't think he has the chutzpah.
This happens in America, doesn't it? It's like Lindsey Graham saying that, I'm done with Trump or Trump's the worst, or, even Ted Cruz, there's tape of Ted Cruz saying, would never choose this guy. This guy is a narcissist. And yet all of this video evidence of them seems to be kind of no value to them in the modern day.
Yeah.
Now, there is the situation where the main Republican Party, including Mitch McConnell, are basically turning their backs on him at the moment, aren't they? Nobody will commit to saying, yes, if Donald Trump is the nominee, then we will support him.
Well, certain members of the House are doing it. And that's what's going to be so interesting in the House. And I'm sure you and I will get to talking about this new Republican House, which is just going to be the slimmest margin. But, there are a fair amount of Republican House members who are all in for Donald Trump, who are all in on the insurrection, who were all in on the insurrection on the day. The Marjorie Taylor Greenes and the Jim Jordans, these guys are full team Trump.
Yeah, Matt Gaetz got reelected. He's there too. How?
Yeah, listen.
Why?
There's a lot that I question that happened in Florida, but just in general, there's quite a few things that from the Republican election that are quite astounding. I think we have to be honest that there are still so many people that we did very well. The Democrats did very well. We defeated a lot of election deniers. We have some semblance of accountability for a party that has turned so deliberately anti-democratic. But as of now, we have something like 164 Republicans who denied the 2020 election, who won their midterm races, who are going to be in the House.
And this is very dangerous, isn't it?
Very dangerous.
Let's be serious about this.
Incredibly dangerous.
We've got election deniers. We've got people who are, Putin sympathizers. Mm-hmm. We've got people who are conspiracy theorists. Mm-hmm. And these people now have control of Congress.
Let's be honest. They have the numerical control of Congress. But
but they can organize these hearings. They're gonna have a hearing for this. They'll try and impeach Joe Biden.
Yes.
They'll set up, committees. They'll waste so much taxpayers' money. They'll waste so much time. They'll do investigations into stuff that nobody knows what they're talking about. They'll find nothing, and they're just like treading water for 2 years because they don't want to spend any money and they don't want to do anything for their people. Yeah,
but also they want to keep the rage machine up. I actually think it might backfire on them. I think that the American public will get tired pretty fast of watching a group of people, like you said, tread water for 2 years and just cause a lot of bubbles to come up, just like thrashing in the water for 2 years is exhausting.
Yeah, with Jim Jordan at the front.
Of the judiciary
committee. I know.
It feels like we're living in the frickin' upside down. All I can think is, perhaps with a special counsel being freeing up Merrick Garland, we might find that there are a certain amount of sitting members of Congress that actually end up in investigations. I would not be surprised in the next couple of years if a couple of them have to leave because they end up in jail. And then with the House being so close, I don't think we should be so sure that the Republicans are going to hold that House for 2 years. I really just don't think we should be so positive of that. There's a lot of people in there that have done a lot of bad things. And Merrick Garland has been working very diligently, very quietly on a lot of elements that happened around January 6th. And we know that there's a lot of sitting members of Congress who had a role in that. So I will be interested to see if they all end up in their positions. But I also think that whoever the speaker tends to be, because people are already coming for Kevin McCarthy's job, he doesn't even have it yet, it's going to be hard to, as I said earlier, to herd this particular group of cats. Like, there are people that just got elected in New York, in upper New York State, who are very centrist, classic Republicans. And then there's your Marjorie Taylor Greenes and your Jim Jordans. And if you have to get everyone to agree, you have to get all 218 members to be the majority vote. Good luck. Like, that's going to be very difficult. Like, they don't have that skill to whip up the votes like Nancy Pelosi did. And they don't have that buffer to lose a couple people. They just don't. And I'd like to see Marjorie Taylor Greene work with a classic Republican from New York State. Like, that's going to be difficult. It's very conspiratorial. Not all of the Republican members are conspiratorial. There's a reason Joe Biden keeps talking about the good GOP, the classic Republicans, the reaching across the aisle. And people go, what are you doing, man? Reach across the aisle to these yahoos? Like, how can we do that? But there are still some Republicans who can be reasonable and centrist and Lisa Murkowski-ish, you know what I mean? And it's going to be hard for Kevin McCarthy or whoever takes the job to wrangle all 218 of them to get a majority vote. And even if they get a majority vote, it goes to the Democratic Senate. We have seen what happens when something passes in the House and goes to the Senate when it's opposite. It's not going to get done. You could impeach Joe Biden. You could all get together and impeach Joe Biden for wearing aviators or whatever. And then it gets to the Senate for a trial and they're like, no, thanks. We don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not
just
going to
the
go.
time
It's just such a waste
and the
of
money.
Yeah.
And the tragedy is that, you know, poverty is rife in America and homelessness is rife in America. And I was talking on last week's show about automation and about AI and about the future. These are the things that other countries now are working on. They are working to mitigate, but also to embrace these new technologies. And I haven't heard any of that from anybody in these administrations. And I just want to mention Joe Biden very quickly because he did play a bit of a blinder, didn't he? That's a very British phrase.
That is a very British phrase.
It is. I apologize. He pulled off quite the miracle. And I think people have underestimated Joe Biden a lot, but there is a lot to be said for somebody who has been in the Senate and even in the White House for 150 years, literally. I mean, he there's nothing he doesn't know. Right. And I think that the right-wing media give him bad press because, of course, he is going to be 80 in a few days. And, that is quite old. But it doesn't stop him, for all of his faults with his speech impediment and everything else, doesn't prevent him from having excellent strategy and being one of the great kind of, as you say, reaching across the aisle, one of the great diplomats of the White House.
He's one of the
this win, the midterm win, pretty much for Democrats across the country, is unprecedented for the first term for a president.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I think Joe Biden is continually underestimated. I think he's continually maligned. I think people will look back on his time in office and be like, geez, that guy got so much done. He knew what he was doing. Like you said, there's something to be said for knowing how the whole system works. I mean, he knows how it works from the ground up, and he's still learning. I mean, I was at the White House a month ago, and I met with him. And it's because he's still trying to reach out to younger people. He's still trying to find us where we are so he can connect with us and find out what we need to know and keeping the lines of communication open. He's a septuagenarian. He doesn't need to learn about young people's things, but he wants to know. He's continuing to grow and learn and try. And I think that goes back to, what's also happening with Nancy Pelosi. She's 83 years old. She's just stepping down now, not leaving her job. She's just going to be a sitting member of Congress now, as opposed to the speaker. But this is one of those perfect examples where it's not about age. It's about ability to adjust to the times. And Nancy Pelosi adjusted to the times. Joe Biden adjusts to the times. Yes, they are creatures of a different era. They are creatures of Washington, but in a way that they understand what they're dealing with, that they can use their gravitas and their moral structure to lead us rather than just take up space and collect a check.
And it's the opposite of the Make America Great Again movement, isn't it? Because that movement is all about 1976 or 1952. It's about building walls. It's about segregation. It's about, removal of women's rights. It's about, the breaking that, not allowing people to love who they love. It's like it might as well be 60 years ago.
Yeah.
And there is nothing that is modern or progressive about that. And they're very proud of that. And this is what I was saying about AI and automation. It's like there is stuff happening in the rest of the world that Republicans are so behind on because all they seem to care about is Hunter Biden's laptop.
Yeah,
I mean, who even uses a laptop these days?
Don't you? But I love my laptop. But no, listen, here's the thing. Like, they are living in a different reality, which is why they pitch a different reality to us on their television programs and their radio shows and through their talking heads. They are talking about making America great again, which implies
white again.
Exactly. It implies a time when it was great. And there is no time in American history, zero time in American history where it was great for everyone. There is a time in American history where it was absolutely great for white rich men of means, period. And so that is the time they're talking about. And that is a time before women's rights, before civil rights, honestly, before the New Deal, when people had workers' rights, right? We are looking at this crazy resurgence of kind of American barons and these people that had gross amounts of money and could treat their employees however they wanted to and treat women however they wanted to and treat minorities however they wanted to. I mean,
well, you're describing the founding fathers.
That too, but also like the robber barons and the people that made the railroads and the people that made our newspapers. And, you know, at least those billionaires used to build museums and art, things to put their name on. And now
some infrastructure.
Now they're not doing that. Now we have the Elons of the world, and it's just a new aristocracy. It's a new robber baron age where some people have a voice and the rest of us work for them. And I don't think there could be a bigger contrast between the two parties than that. One party is supported, held up by, and financed by those robber baron types, and they serve them. And the other party is attempting some sort of multicultural, pluralistic democracy that works for everybody. And that's much harder. It's harder to do. We're going to get it wrong. We're not going to make everyone happy all the time, but we're trying. We are absolutely trying to do it.
But is it not futile when half the voters don't care for democracy? I mean, I'm getting a bit tired, really, of even the left kind of pushing, we need to maintain our democracy. It's all about democracy. And I don't think anybody on the right now wants that system. That system is of no use to them because they can't really manipulate that system. They can't really win. They don't want people to have a vote. And that's probably why they did so badly in the midterms, because a lot of people were like, well, what's the point in voting? Because they've been told by a whole bunch of candidates that the vote is foolish anyway and is corrupt. They'd much rather have a dictator in the form of Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis, who basically, a little bit like President Xi Jinping or even Putin with his 22 years in office, who just keeps going and keeps going and keeps going and maintains that status quo. I mean, is that not a tragedy that like half the voters, not half the country, but half the voters are effectively completely nonplussed about democracy as you and I know it?
Well, yes, it is a tragedy. I mean, to answer your question simply, it is absolutely a tragedy, but it's also a tragedy of information deficits and a tragedy of deliberately confusing people so they vote against their own best interests over and over again. It's why I say I don't spend most of my time trying to reach out to people who have decided that it would be easier to just be told top down what to do, who prefer an authoritarian way of life. It's the same kind of people who defer to the Bible, which is why those two groups go together so well, the evangelicals and the Republican Party as it is today, because it's a lot of top down leadership. Here's what the book says. Yeah. Here's how you behave. This is what you do. You do this. You're a good person. The end. Right? There's no critical thought to that. That's just I'm following the rules and here I go and everything is fine and I end up in heaven. Right? In this way, it's the same thing for government. It's not a lot of work on your part to just do exactly what you're told, and a lot of people don't want any work on their part. It's too much effort. Like you just said, I'm so tired.
Well, they don't even want to go and vote.
I'm so tired.
Because going to vote is effort.
Yes.
that especially if there's only one polling place in the whole state. It's like that there is this reluctance, and maybe Republicans have shot themselves in the foot, because in the process of making it more difficult to vote, and because they're trying to reduce the number of black and brown people voting or minority groups or whatever it is, they're actually disenfranchising their own people. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I would love that for that to be the case. I'm not a Democrat. I don't get to vote, but I am pro-democracy.
Right.
And I care vehemently about people's rights and individuals' rights. And yet America, which is, you're an immigrant the same as me, we came here because it was the free world. We came here because freedom is like the word that is, waved and it's written everywhere. I mean, no one talks about freedom in England, where I'm from, and I'm sure in Canada they don't mention it that much either.
We don't.
But for some reason, it seems to be the very fabric of American culture is freedom. And yet these turkeys are voting for Christmas.
Yeah, they're voting against freedom every single time. And I think that's why we need to focus on expanding the message to people who don't vote, expanding the message to people who think it doesn't matter, expanding the message that the country could be what we tell everyone it is. The country could be what we sell in the brochure and this shining city on a hill and this land of opportunity, the country we moved to. Land of the free, home of the brave, right? That's where we came. We came to be a part of that. And we're not that. Once you're immersed in America, you go like, wow. I mean, this is like when you see the brochure of a resort and you go, look at this gorgeous beach, look at this beautiful hotel, and you show up and you're like,
and there's a construction site right outside.
Exactly. There's like needles on the beach and like ants in your room. That's a little bit like America. And that does not mean we can't clean it up. That does not mean we can't clean the beach and paint the walls and make the hotel what it looks like in the brochure. But it means it's going to take work. And a lot of people look at that and go like, no, thanks. I'm not interested in doing that work. But I believe, and I believe this last election showed us, that there are more people in America, even voting people, taking non-voters out of it. There are more people in America who do believe that we can do the work, who do believe in what we have. And look at these freaking Gen Zs, right? These kids are kids. They are kids. 28%.
They changed the game.
They changed the game. 28% of them came out. 2 years from now, how many more of them will be available to vote? My son will be available to vote in the next midterms. He's 14 years old. Can't wait to vote, right? So open-minded, so believing in democracy.
But also this generation are digitally literate.
Yes.
And that's the difference.
Very helpful.
Right. To be digitally literate, to be able to tell the difference between what is true and what is false, what is propaganda and what is factual. It's essential. And, the Republicans that I've come into contact with, both virtually and in person, they are digitally illiterate. They cannot tell that an article that is on Rumble is not written by some quack doctor, is not, the real deal. And this information warfare is really at the heart of all of this and will be with future elections. And this is why Elon Musk, who, when I interviewed Ruth Ben-Ghiat the other day, she wrote the book Strongmen. She said that amazing. He is a Russian asset. He is doing Putin's bidding. He is spending $44 billion buying Twitter and will either turn it into a right-wing platform or will shut it down. Yeah. And that would be very disappointing because it is one of the few town squares that the United States has. I just want to talk about Pelosi stepping down and Biden and their age. Do you think it's important going forward as we discuss Gen Z and the literacy, or the digital literacy, that we have younger leaders? Do you think how different would the landscape be if the likes of, Mitch McConnell and his various necks and Joe Biden walking the wrong direction after a speech? I mean, if none of that happened and we had Pete Buttigieg and his, no nonsense, or Gavin Newsom, or any of these characters who really, they've got 40 years on these guys.
Yeah. Look, I am not, I'm not ageist in any way, in that I believe, like I said, I believe Joe Biden is doing an absolutely bang up job. I don't think that anybody else than Joe Biden could have beat Trump in 2020. I believe there's something perfect about Joe Biden because they just can't, the opposition just can't get their hooks into him for anything specific. He's not too young. He's not gay. He's not black. He's not there. He's just a white, straight man who's nice.
Well, he looks like a Republican from a distance. You'd think
he's
he was
the
a
quintessential American president, right? So it's very hard to paint him with a brush. I think he was exactly right for the moment. So who am I to say, oh, well, if you're over 80, forget it, because, you know what I mean? Nancy Pelosi. Did you see those videos of her during the January 6th attack? I mean, they keep putting more out. The January 6th committee, she was poised and controlled and centered and trying to get back to doing the job, and no panic.
And calling the National Guard whilst eating a beef jerky.
She's incredible. And she's 83 years old. So I'm not going to be in a position to say, no, step down. No, you're too old. Do I think that there is something to be said for a younger generation? Yes. My father, one of the most brilliant men I've ever met, was a litigant. He's sharp. I mean, one of the smartest men you could ever meet. He's 80 now. He's still brilliant, but he's slower. He's a slower version. And I don't think he would want to run at this age. He would say, oh, no, I've passed my prime. It's not like I couldn't sit in a board and have lots to say, but I shouldn't be in the spotlight anymore. And
it's just reaction times, isn't it? I think maybe
honestly,
that's what
it's
changed.
Reaction time, 100%.
Yeah.
But it's also, that's why I'm so excited about Nancy Pelosi doing what she's done, right? She's a historic figure. She is the most powerful elected woman in U.S. history when she became the speaker in 2007. And then again in 2019, because we forget that it wasn't until 2020 that we even had a female vice president. You in England, you guys have had leaders, prime ministers that were women. We still have not done that.
1979.
Yeah, hello. We still haven't done that. They've done it in Canada. We still haven't done that. So when Nancy Pelosi became Speaker of the House and third in line, it was such a big deal. And because she did that, we have so many other women in power. When she came into Congress in 1987, there were 12 Democratic women in all of Congress. Now there's 90, right? And that is because she showed us the path. She showed us the route. And while she was there, she spoke out for bills that championed women, for advancing women's causes, for speaking up for a voice that hadn't been there before. She is amazing. She's amazing. And she's the perfect example of age is not the point. Attitude is the point. Are you ready to lead? She is still ready to lead, but she knows that her time has come and she is stepping back for the good of the party. But she's not doing it by herself, right? She's stepping back. Probably Hakeem Jeffries will step into her place. Hakeem Jeffries is Gen X like us, right? He's 52. It's not like he's 27 years old or 36 like Pete Buttigieg. But I'm psyched for Hakeem, right? He is ballsy and brazen, and his pinned tweet on his Twitter account is when he went at Clarence Thomas for being such a hater, right? And he was like, you hate on civil rights and you hate on women's rights and you hate on reproductive rights and voting rights and marital rights. Like, why are you such a hater? Why do you think you can just get away with it? Because you're shameless? Like, is shamelessness your superpower? That's his pinned tweet. Do I want that guy running the Democratic caucus? Hell yeah, I do. But so
it's very
Nancy.
powerful, though, isn't it? Those types of that type of language. But if I play devil's advocate just for a moment,
sure.
If someone like Hakeem had been around for the last 5 to 10 years, do you think that that would have been a better opposition to the Donald Trump administration and to this whole kind of extremist movement? Do you think that, because I love moments when Nancy tore up the speech after the State of the Union, there are a few kind of great moments, but American politics is in a terrible, terrible state. And you could argue that Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and these people have presided over this period of American political history. And maybe if we had people who had more of a voice and didn't play so much by the rules, because the other team isn't playing by the rules, that they could have been more successful in securing impeachments or whatever, whatever kind of came their way. I'm just playing devil's advocate because
I appreciate the position, but here's what I would say. Everyone wants to see fire with fire, right? Like you want to see, but there was no alternative to Donald Trump that was exactly the same vibe that could give it as good as he could, right? Donald Trump also had people working with him like Mitch McConnell, who was just quietly doing the Federalist Society's business, just stacking the court. There was a lot of things in action. And I think I was personally not thrilled with Chuck Schumer being the majority Senate leader. And then I watched him absolutely work Mitch McConnell with the Inflation Reduction Act and the CHIPS Act. And
there's so much we don't see.
I'm telling you, they were like, we are voting against these burn pit things for soldiers. Ha ha. Right. And they were like, ooh, let's put that in the public. And the public was like, who votes against helping veterans who have been burned? And then they were all like, oh, well, we'll come back and we'll vote for that again. And Chuck Schumer was like, yeah, you'll vote for that again after you vote for the CHIPS Act. So then to save face, they had to vote on something they didn't want to vote on. And then he had already told them he was getting rid of the Inflation Reduction Act. And then he brought it back and they couldn't stop him. And they got that passed too. So Chuck Schumer outmaneuvered Mitch McConnell. So to say he was old and he didn't have it, I think he did have it. Now, would I like to see Chuck Schumer step down at the same time as Nancy Pelosi? Maybe. Because maybe it's just time for new leadership. Steny Hoyer.
It would be interesting to have a different landscape, wouldn't it?
Yes, and I think that's where we're at.
A breath of fresh air.
Steny Hoyer is stepping down as the current majority leader of the Democratic Party in the House. James Clyburn, who's a huge figure in the Democratic Party and really is credited for giving Biden his push during the primaries. He's House Whip. They're both in their 80s, and they are also stepping down with Nancy Pelosi. So we're going to have 3 new young members of the Democratic caucus stepping up. So I'll be interested to see
And yet no change on the other side, right? Because, the likes of Rona McDaniel are staying in their jobs and Mitch McConnell has been reelected. I mean, they don't want to change it, which is why, in my opinion, they will select Donald Trump as their leader. They will have him fight the election. I don't think DeSantis will get a look in, and I think that they'll default to what they know best, and they will lose.
I think so.
And so, in a way, I'm kind of happy that will happen and that democracy will prevail. But the next 2 years are going to be miserable.
Oh, a mess. It's going to be an absolute mess, Anthony. And I think we just have to keep in mind that democracy's a mess. That's what happens when you let a lot of people's voices come at the same time. You're like, you know what I mean? Like, it is very hard to get a melody happening with that many voices, right? That's why people love authoritarianism. They love dictatorships. It seems simple and easy, and I'll make a decision and we'll get it done, right? But those types of governments never actually succeed. They succeed for a while, but they always end up getting toppled. It's like looking back in history when you're like, oh, would it have been nice to be the king of England in the 1500s? You're like, no, everyone was trying to murder you. And like, you had to have a son right away. And like, your cousin was coming to get you. That's what it feels like. It's like this constant battle to keep your place. And I feel like the beauty of democracy is that it really is supposed to be a growing progressive thing. And the Democrats really are showing us they are the party of progress. They're not all progressive, but they are capable of growing and changing. And they are allowing the whole image of the party to change now. And it's time, right? It is time. They had the old guard protect themselves from Trump 1.0, and now they're going to have the new guard be here for Trump 2.0, and they've already learned from that. And I think that'll be fascinating to watch. But also, like, that's the party that believes in little d democracy. That's the only party in this country that believes in it. And when people say, but we need 2 parties, Leigh, we can't just have one party. We don't have one party. Look at the Democratic Party. It's like this umbrella, right? Where you have your Joe Manchins and your Lincoln Party, Lincoln Project guys. And then over here you have your Nina Turners and your Bernie Sanders and your AOCs. I'm sorry, those people are not in the same party. No. I mean, they are.
And that's why it's so hard to market the Democratic Party.
Right, and so you have to market.
In comparison to the Republicans, where it's dead simple. It's no to abortion. It's no to interracial marriage or whatever's coming down the line. It's very, very simple for them. Yeah. And yet the nuance of society and the nuance of life and the nuance of politics is the Democratic Party. And it's a bit like, here in California, the mayoral election was just won by Karen Bass, who is a black woman. She was up against Rick Caruso, who is a white property developer. Well, we've had white property developers in administrations before, and it does not work very well.
Right.
And the Californian people voted for her. She's a career politician, but there is something about people that give their life over to civic duty.
Yeah, I don't think she's a career
better candidates.
Yeah, I don't think she's a career politician. I think one of the beauties of Karen Bass is that she's a career public servant, right? She chose to go into public service, starting with social work, right? And then she built a community coalition, which was like for homelessness and drug abuse and this kind of thing. She built it from the ground up. Then she left it and thought, I can help more people. That is still running. That company 30 years later is still running. She went and she ran for state government and she thought, I can help more people. Then she took classes at night to get a master's in social work so she could do her job as a state senator better, congresswoman better. Then she was like, I can take this even bigger. So she went to federal government and she worked there and she got so much done. And then she looked back at her city and was like, oh, they're not doing so great. Like I'm going to leave my guaranteed job, because she would have been reelected in a heartbeat. Everyone loves her. To come back to run to try and help the city she loves, right? Yeah. And that is different than a career politician. A career politician doesn't move around. They stay in the same job, and that is what they do. A career public servant...
That's a Mitch McConnell.
Yes, it is. And it's, the senator that's Mitch McConnell's second in command from South Dakota. The guy's never lived in South Dakota. He just lives in Washington, right? And the Democrat that ran against him in South Dakota, Brian Banks, this year... The man's incredible. But everyone's like, oh, well, you can't vote for a Democrat in South Dakota. You're like, you know what? you can. And give us a couple more years and you'll be voting for this man. Because you're a career politician. You're a creature of Washington. Those are the people we need to be done with. The people that are for democracy, for the people, for progress, for change, that's who we need to be supporting, no matter what letter is beside their name. And I think the American people, slowly but surely are going to get it. The problem is that the system is structured for us to not get it. That's the problem.
Because Trump, in his terrible speech the other day, made the same play about the fact that he's not a politician and that what, America needs is not another. He is now, exactly. Mm-hmm. He's got form. But he made that point, I'm not a politician, I'm the alternative. And trying to basically push the same narrative that he did in 2016. The record is now starting to sound a little tired. And yet, the whole cast of characters will end up, I'm sure, we'll go through a period of a few weeks of confusion, and Ron DeSantis will probably end up, missing in some terrible schmelting accident. But Trump is going to end up, still that kind of character that is to face whoever in 2024. Is Joe Biden the man to face him? I mean, could there be somebody else? Could there be a female? Should it be the vice president taking should Joe Biden step down in the last few weeks? I mean, is Biden at 82, as he will be in 2024, the right man to face Donald Trump?
Yeah, I think the thing is that the speed in which our government is moving, the craziness the country is trying to absorb, these are questions I'm not really that interested in answering at this moment, because I feel like, let's see what happens in a year. Like I said, I'm not even completely convinced the Republicans are going to hold that majority for the next 2 years. I think a bunch of them could be removed,
We've also got that Senate runoff in Georgia with Herschel Walker.
That's right. And we really need to win that. That's essential. It's essential.
Because that takes the power away from Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema and that kind of,
but it also makes they've had
the controlling stake.
Yes, it takes away the power from any one Democratic senator that wants to work in their own benefit. But it also, people don't realize the difference between a 50-50 Senate and a 51-49 Senate. A 51-49 Senate means you don't have to split the committees equally. Right now, the committees have to be split equally. And so normal things that come through, like Joe Biden nominates, the ambassador to Portugal, and the ambassador to Portugal goes to the, Senate, and he's supposed to go to a committee, and they go, yeah, he seems fine, approved, and he goes off to Portugal to do his job. Right now, what the Republicans do, because it's an even vote, they reject everything. Every ambassador, every nominee, every judicial nominee, anything the Senate is trying to get done in committee, they reject it. Because what happens is they have to take that person to the Senate floor for a full Senate vote. But they know they're not going to win in a full Senate vote, because they know that the Democrats have 50 plus one, the vice president. They're always going to win in a full Senate vote. So why are they doing it? It's like, what a waste of time, right? And that's exactly it. That's a waste of time. While everyone has to fly back to D.C. and the vice president can't go abroad and everyone has to be there to take this vote. Yes, the, ambassador of Portugal, go. You know what I mean? Like, while they're doing that, they're not passing laws. They're not in their states working around. They're not out in different states talking about democratic ideals. They are busy. It's the equivalent of having a meeting in your office when it could have been an email. It's just a total waste of time, and they do it on purpose. If we get a 51st senator, all of those committees are Democratic majorities. So it could be, 9-8, and the person goes off to Portugal. And that's going to save us so much time, so much money, and it will free up the vice president to do so many more things. People keep saying, where's Kamala Harris? I haven't seen her at all. It's because she's babysitting the freaking Senate. Yeah, she has to babysit the Senate to be the 51st vote on every single thing that comes through. What a waste of time. So despite the fact that Herschel Walker has no business anywhere near the Senate, the man is a problem on about 75 different levels.
And it's ironic that Raphael Warnock is actually a perfect candidate for Republicans to vote for.
He's,
the man's a reverend and Christian. I mean, he's like, he's absolutely bang on the money. The language that he speaks is something that like true Christian Americans would want to vote for, and yet they're going to go for the guy who's paying for abortions. I mean,
and talking about vampires and werewolves and werewolves. I mean, we're well off on another planet with that guy. But
would you rather be the werewolf or the vampire? I just thought
I have to be a vampire. I mean, there's no question in my mind that I'm a vampire. I mean, I don't even know why we would even discuss it. But honestly, it is amazing to me the difference between 51-49 and 50-50.
Yeah.
And I think people have forgotten it. We could just have, it's the difference between working government and dysfunctional government. And people just should vote for that, because it's not even like you're saying, oh, well, I have to vote because then Republicans get in power. They won't. Either way, Democrats are in power. So you may as well vote for an efficient government. And, the 24 election is going to be a tough one. So we can take every seat we need right now.
We have to finish, but I just finally want to say that I am very grateful to you for your activism, because it's people like you with your videos and MeidasTouch with their videos that have definitely swung these midterm elections in the direction of pro-democracy. And, I think that really it's very important to recognize there are people up and down the country that are just doing their little bit. And you in front of your refrigerator is essential. It's essential. And, I also love the fact that the people who are often the most active aren't even from America. It's like they just want the country to be its best, love the country. And it's like, it's not criticism. It is wanting to get the very best out of the US, because it has so much to offer. And it really could go back to being the greatest country in the world. It's so close. So thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you for being here today.
Thank you for doing what you do too. There's so much news, and it's so essential that we are able to break it down for people in a way that they can absorb it and go into the world with knowledge, because knowledge is where everything starts. When you know something, then you can care about something. And when you care about something, that's when change can happen, because you care to change it and you know enough about it. And that starts with just plain old knowledge, which you give people every single day, which is astounding to me. I don't know how you do it. But I believe in this country. I believe in the people. I believe America could be, as you said, the country that we want to be. And it's just going to take work. And people have to be like, okay, pull up my sleeves. Like, I got this, because we do got this. But we just have to be ready for setbacks, ready for work, ready for effort, one day at a time.
Okay. Leigh McGowan, thank you very much once again. I'm Anthony Davis. Don't forget to subscribe to The Weekend Show on YouTube or as an audio podcast, and also the 5 Minute News daily podcast, which drops every morning so you can listen while you make your coffee and leave an iTunes review. Join me next week with a brand new special guest and 3 more factual news stories to discuss on the 5 Minute News Weekend Show with MeidasTouch.